Hello. We're in part two of our interview with Pamela Boyce Simms and her project, Inner Landscapes Activist Community of Practice. This is a grassroots economic organizing production, and also with the Grow Democracy Project, which is a project that I'm beginning. So Pamela talked to us a lot about how she, although she would probably word this a little differently, I'm still kind of stuck on planet Earth, can put it that way. But it has pulled together Buddhism, Quakerism, neurosciences, quantum physics, etc., and has a very, 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 very complex but unified picture of how all of this can work, and has developed the inner landscape program is a very transformative approach to change. And as I understand it, there isn't a distinction, or there isn't a break between personal change and social change. Many people think of, okay, I got to go work this out, with the therapist, and I'll go back and I'll do all of my activist work, that'll make me feel better, etc. But you have it very, very, very tightly integrated. So that's one of the things I think would be good to explore. But maybe let's just start with, why are you focused on activists? You seem to say there's a very important connection between your work and really getting to the activists who are out, who really are into social change.
Yes, I'm into activism for a very Buddhist, Taoist reason. And that is, as I alluded to before, we are in embodiment to exponentially evolve, because a dense physical environment speeds up, subject to the laws of physics, of all the problems and the challenges and the horrid conditions that we see here, as well as the beauty. That is what we need to smooth the rough edges, to evolve through relationship and through challenge. And you can't do that as just your non-material self. It's much more difficult. If we are consciousness and we are that, evolving in a physical form is extremely important. And there are many different reality frames in which we can evolve. The Earth happens to be one absolutely fabulous, a little snow globe. It's a little simulator in which a little classroom that has all of the right environment for us to evolve in a human form, so our consciousness can come into this little snow globe. And there are many, many, many little snow globes. There are lots of different reality frames, but the Earth is the one that we have taken embodiment in now. And we know that the Earth is in travail, is dealing with existential, multi-tiered, complex challenges at this point: species extinction and climate change and resource depletion and economic contraction. All of these things threaten the physical platform for evolution. So I came into work with environmental work as a person who was heading up the environmental initiatives for a monastery that I was living in at the time, because the head of my lineage, who is the 17th Jalwang Karmapa, who is under the is one of the head of one of the 4 Tibetan schools of Buddhism. He's currently under the wing of the Dalai Lama, both of whom are in exile, as you know, in Dharamsala, in Jiaotu, and Dharamsala. I was living in the Karmapa's monastery in upstate New York in Woodstock, and he mandated all of his monasteries around the world: Bhutan, Tibet, India, Nepal, and the United States and Europe. Everyone, the monks, the nuns, had to do work in the world, in the environment, in environmental movements where they were. So that's how I came into working with a global environmental movement. And I was also point person for His Holiness the Karmapa, the 17th Jalwang Karmapa's North American affiliates. So Buddhism recognizes that our consciousness, our non-material selves, can evolve exponentially faster in physical form. But the physical form of a human body needs a platform for evolution, hence the earth. So that being said, that is where my activism originated. The fact that billions and billions of people need this platform for evolution. So it's environmental activism that actually was the touchstone.
No, and it's also the path you're proposing and offering training in also relates very much to other forms of oppression.
No.
Okay.
Really categorically, no. If you bring into mind the fish-looking white energy moving around the circle with a dark energy, you're familiar with the Tai Chi,
Mm-hmm.
the symbol of the Tai Chi,
Mm-hmm.
the yin and yang. Well, if you zoom out and you're not totally form focused, there's an understanding that what appears to be dark and evil and horrible and oppressive is absolutely vital for the light. The light cannot exist without that. It's 2 sides of the exact same coin. One at a low dense frequency, one at a much higher frequency, but it is still the same data stream. It is the same field. It is the same energy, just qualified in a different way at different frequencies. So my activism is specifically about preserving. This is my activism. As I bring this to other people, they can use that. They can use the cultivated awareness of their vastness in any kind of activism they choose. I'm speaking only for myself, and that is specifically activism having to do with the planet and preserving this platform for evolution in physical embodiment, because, as I mentioned, all of the hellishness here, everything that looks like oppression, everything that is experienced as oppression, everything that is excruciating, is the dark side of the Tai Chi. It is the lower frequencies that make higher frequencies possible. It is the springboard for evolution, the hellishness as well as the light. So I invite other activists who are involved in all of the working with all of the isms and all of the oppressive whatever, to take these tools and go there. I don't, because most of the activism from my vantage point has to do with getting involved with egoic constructs, which are the gender and race and socioeconomics and all of those qualifiers that you began to introduce me with. And I said, that's not me. It is ways in which I relate to the world, but it really has nothing to do with the pith, the essence, the core of who I am. They're identifiers that someone looks at me and they think they know something. They really don't, but it helps navigate the world of form. But if my activism was tied up in that, for me personally, it would be a horrendous misallocation of my time, because it just pulls me more into the world of form, which is ephemeral anyway. And I would much rather be directing my full attention and intent and purposeful work toward invoking more of the light, elevating frequencies to the higher, as opposed to focusing my attention on resistance, because as you know, what you resist persists. So everyone that is beating their heads up against all of the isms and all of these things, they're just precipitating more of the same thing. So my activism is very definitely springs from preserving the platform of evolution, which for me at this point in time is the planet Earth.
Okay. I want to pick up on that in part 3 when we explore some questions. Let me shift to a little bit more, quote, practical, because you have a very expansive view of practical. So I'm a member of an intentional community, which is like what we call a cooperative solidarity institution. And I could also at the same time be a member of a worker cooperative. And all of that involves a lot of interacting with people and dealing with, you know, all of the things everyone struggles with, as well as trying to accomplish the objectives of each kind of institution. So if I enter your practice, I move into that inner landscape work. How is that? How am I going to use that? Or I'll make the decision to use it, but sketch out some way in which I can sense that this really is going to be important for the work that I do.
Well, at the moment, many there are members of the grassroots economic organizing editorial collective and worker co-ops that are part of the community of practice and are using it very, very practically. What this does is it's not something you have to sit down and make time for. As a matter of fact, I mean, people can do that if they want to, but it is not like we cordon off some time in the course of our day and we find a nice quiet space and we sit down and we do these practices. It is the antithesis of that. The entire focus here is to remain in metacognitive position as you walk around, brushing your teeth, walking your dog, raking the leaves, washing your dishes. The entire purpose of this is to live into the vastness of who you are all of the time, 24/7, to be in contact, and your life, your thinking, your emotional refractory periods are all completely part and parcel and informed by a more vast understanding of yourself as you interact with other people, yourself as you walk your dog. So there is no making time for it. That is a total misnomer. You do not have to make time for this. It's what we learn, what monastics learn when you are invited to live your life as a meditation. Life is the meditation. Yes, you may have some time where you sit down and you do nothing but this becomes your life. Having not being pulled into emotionally traumatic situations, not being unseated by coworkers. I live in an intentional community too. And it's learning to see what's going on there, not by subjectively being subject to it and batted about by the emotional drama of it, but be constant, because you do a disservice to yourself and a disservice to the community or a disservice to your workplace or your worker co-op if you cannot see the forest for the trees, if you're bumping it around in a maze with everybody else. If you are able to, if as many people as in your community as are doing this can constantly maintain perspective that is witnessing and observing yourself at the same time as you are acting and interacting, you become more loving, you become more compassionate, you see the bigger picture, you can intervene more astutely with much more impact and understanding of more of the dynamics if you can do this all of the time or a lot of the time. And if you are unseated, your emotional refractory periods, which just means the time when you're not in homeostasis, you're not stable, you're not balanced, when you're knocked out of kilter or you're out of sorts. The emotional refractory period is the time it takes you to come back to homeostasis, just like in a meditation when your thoughts wander off come back to still point consciousness. Emotional refractory periods are the same type of thing. Your emotional refractory periods get shorter and shorter and shorter because you have the points of reference or you've developed the skill set to come back quicker when something knocks you out of kilter. An intentional community, in a worker co-op, in a movement setting where everything is done in group and consensus or sociocracy or holocracy or egalitarian systems or equivalence or universal agency is so important in all of these movements. To be able to have that kind of witnessing, observer, metacognitive understanding as you're working in communities would be so much more harmonious. And you can't get more practical than that.
Yeah, it reminds me of one of the things I read in one of your articles, in which you say the community of practice, cognitive restructuring work, widens our field of vision, which increases our palette of perceived choices. Practices peel away the sediment of cultural conditioning, the constricting points of reference and beliefs about ourselves and our reality frames. So it's like, you do that, then if I do that, or to the extent that I do that, I'm going to be much more present in the work that I do, in the relationships with the people in my community, the work that I do outside the community or wherever, and with the work with myself.
Yes. Very, very often when we say, I'm going to be present from a mindfulness or insight meditation perspective or just paying attention, that is the cornerstone. Paying attention, being aware is step one. Where we're going is enhancing that to truly understand the way the interior of our circuitry works, our mind works, to understand that the brain is meant only to be a receiver transmitter that gets us around in this physical world of form. However, we deify it. Our meritocracy is based on it. Linear Cartesian logic backed up by Newtonian physics, which is so passé and démodé that it is incessantly tripping us up. Mindfulness, as it often rolls off our tongue, is a function of willpower. And we're not talking about willpower. We're talking about a truly deepened understanding of who we are that allows us truly to be conduits for vast self, as opposed to figuring things out or paying attention mindfully with willpower. It's like not even apples and oranges, it's apples and zebras. However, it's a, you know, paying attention is a starting point.
I can see very directly how this relates to my picture of growing democracy. So I can take a moment to kind of plug my project. To me, democracy starts with and ends with people being able to listen to each other, really wanting to understand, and then they can talk together and think together and work together. And if we don't have, if that's not the core that people keep coming back to, the democracy isn't going to be working. And what you're talking about is the kind of presence, expansion, compassion, opening of heart and mind that's really necessary to do that kind of work. It's very, very transformative. So let's talk about some of. Go ahead. Did you want to add something? Okay.
I just wanted to say I would agree with you as long as it has nothing to do with head analysis, mind, analytical thinking, and the intellect. Listening to people because you have a series of techniques and you know it's a good thing to do is an intellectual process. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that that is a good first step to understand. Listening to people deeply is important, and wanting to inviting yourself to feel compassionate about people and what their needs are, etc. That's a very good first step. Most of that, which is why movements either evaporate or are crushed or do not penetrate, it's all intellectual. It's all, yes, this is a good, I think that this is a good thing to do. That's not what I'm talking about here. So I just wanted to put that proviso in there.
Okay. You can expand on that in part 3. I think it would be good to just to talk a little bit about the methods that you use in inner landscaping. There's the community of practice, and there's the neurology part, and you talked about the role of the meditation. So, what is the community of practice dimension of the inner landscape program?
Well, there are two big, vast issues there, and you can tell me which one you want to explore first. There are the practices, and then there is the community of practice. Do you have a preference? Which one?
No, take it to yeah. I'm throwing it out to kind of give you a canvas to paint, the picture of
Okay.
what you're doing.
Okay. The bottom line is to become an instrument for your larger consciousness and the larger system in which we fit, the larger consciousness frame, the field, the undifferentiated field, etc. So the practices are all about different doorways into enhancing our skill set in physical form to stay open and communicative to the vaster parts of ourselves. So in the typical session that we have, we will begin with a warm-up that is designed to invite people to see how their brains functions, to really look into their internal landscape to see how they're processing information. Now, we encode information actually, it's really in consciousness, but the touch point in the circuitry that are the neuronal pathways in the brain in modalities. So our experience has color, which means frequency. It has sound. It has an auditory component, which means it has pitch and timbre and volume. It has a kinesthetic component, which is a texture and movement and velocity and speed. It has a gustatory component, which is why your life experience that is encoded has a taste may come into your mouth when you think of something in the past. It has an olfactory component, which is why a scent or an aroma may be connected with past experience that's encoded in the circuitry of the brain. It also has an emotional content, which, because we are dealing with the limbic system, which is the emotional brain. So the simulations, we start out with a quick simulation at the beginning of each session that invites you to literally observe how you're processing information, whether your dominant modality for encoding information in the circuitry is visual, is auditory, is gustatory, is olfactory, is kinesthetic. So I will go through almost 20, 25 quick simulations that bring up experience. It's just one sentences that bring up certain types of experience in accordance with certain modalities, and practitioners are invited to see, to not think about it, to not relate it to some experience, to not to turn off the brain, but to see what emerges in that moment and see if they can relate to or sink into whatever the modality that series of simulations relates to. And then they can see whether that is their dominant modality, whether two modalities are present simultaneously. Did you get a sense of texture and taste simultaneously when you heard that? So what it does is, it does a number of things. First of all, the list is long, so it is a focusing meditation. How long can you keep your attention on this list of things that is being brought up for your consideration? Which modality do you immediately feel more comfortable in? Are there several modalities that are happening simultaneously? The invitation is slow down, watch your thoughts, experience how your brain is processing, and see what your strength is. And that also is important because we use the strongest encoding modalities when we're doing the neuro-linguistic work for the cognitive restructuring, the ability to understand how your mind works progressively, to draw up, call up simulations is extremely important. So, and also in that first practice, I do not linger when I'm reading this list of simulations, because if I linger more than 4 to 5 seconds on each sentence that is bringing up a certain scene, the analytical mind will turn on, and it'll want to cling to it and understand it more and get deeper into it and hold on to it and create experiences that it brought up. So if I'm moving through it, it invites people to stay very present with the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing that's coming up, and observe their mind. So that's the first practice in any session we do.
This is keeping me in the limbic system.
Precisely.
Yeah. Okay.
It's inviting you to turn off that prefrontal lobe, still analytical thought, and be only fully present with whatever series. Each series is a specific modality. Be fully present with what you're tasting, or the simulation of that tasting is. Not thinking about scenes it brings up, nothing else. Can you be fully present with what's presented to you? So that's the first thing we do in any session. Do you have any questions? Do you want me to go on to the second thing?
No, that's good. I mean, the other part, that's like an example of the practice thing. I mean, we could spend an hour going through the different elements of the practice. But you were also saying there's the community part.
Right. I just want to mark the point that this is just a 4-minute warm-up. The practices are
Right.
not what I just said.
Right. Okay.
So you want me to skip to the community part now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I'm saying that because the community part is more salient when there's an understanding of the fact that as we get deeper into the practices, which I haven't described yet, we are functioning in more than just one reality frame. And in doing that, it's uncharted territory for most people who are only used to relating to each other just like you and I are talking to each other. This invites you to experience liminal reality frames that are not necessarily physical. Lucid dreaming, for example, or remote healing, or being in touch with that individuated part of yourself, individuated consciousness, which is your vast consciousness, which means that you're getting information that is not coming from the brain. It's not coming from your lived life experience. It's coming from a more vast understanding of the universe and yourself. And because that is uncharted territory for most people, doing this in small groups and then coming together for retreats is extremely important. So you're understanding, yes, this is our birthright. We can all go there together. So there's a locking of arms and a camaraderie and a reinforcement and affirmation as we move into this uncharted territory. So that's why it is a community of practice. Community is the first word. Practice is a second word. This is not like once a month therapy where you check in and then, oh, this is an interesting experience intellectually, and you say, oh, that's fascinating, and then you go about your life and do nothing. In the meantime, it's practice. It's literally, as I said earlier on, it's making this the lenses through which you see your world and yourself and people in your world. This vastness only becomes the norm for you. Your inner landscape becomes more important than the outer landscape in the sense that it informs your outer landscape. That only happens through practice.
Now the term inner landscape, and it's the inner landscape. Excuse me. Inner landscapes, activist community of practice. It all comes together just in the way that you were describing it there. Do you do this work face to face as well as online, like through Zoom?
Yes, I do. I'm located about 35 minutes outside of Philadelphia in a very bucolic part of Pennsylvania.
Beautiful.
And there are people. There are people who live in the area that are doing the practice, and we meet in person. The people that are working here. Also, there is there's so many colleges here. Haverford College is here, and I did a retreat for some Haverford alumni back in May. It was a Rufus Jones retreat, who is a Quaker mystic. And one person there, and I hit it off, and he was extremely interested in the practice. He came into the community of practice, and now his whole company, which is located nearby in Bryn Mawr, is now has his employees now are part of the community of practice, and they are meeting in person and on site here. They're also spread out. Those same people are also participating in online groups so that they can have complete anonymity from their own co-workers in these other groups. But there are times when, if I'm doing an orientation session for someone in that company, or there's times when a few of us will come together, we can do that in person.
Okay. I have a couple of minutes left in this part. And I pulled you away from, I think you wanted to say more about the practices, and I pulled you away to the community part. You want to identify, take a few minutes just to briefly
Well,
sort of,
I can identify what I'll talk about in the next part, because to actually go into each in a couple of minutes would not do it justice. But the second, after the simulations that I described that invite people to understand to be aware of how they process, their modalities, we do a compassion and clarity practice, which invites people to get out of the avatar, the human brain circuitry, and drop into the heart. The brain is an electrical system. It's dwarfed by the electromagnetic field of the heart, and the heart, the physical heart, as well as the non-material energy center, is also the doorway into the quantum field. And the degree to which we are focused on intellect, brain, the meritocracy as we deify it, to that degree is a degree to which we totally miss the vastness of who we are, because we're not tapped into the electromagnetic field of the heart. So the next thing we do are compassion and clarity practices, and then the bulk of our session is usually the cognitive restructuring, which are done in simulations.
okay. And just my own comment about the heart, it has been through work that I've done with the heart math approach. And it's really amazing the basic scientific data that they have generated about how the role of the heart, the field of the energy that it creates around people, it's tangible, it's measurable, and it's not
Absolutely.
it's not just a feeling or an aura, whatever. It's really you can measure it. Okay, so let's stop here. I mean, there's no way we can do all of this justice, but we're at least giving everyone a really good taste of the work that you do. And I want to note here that when this is put online on the GO newsletter, there will be a little written introduction, and the links to your website will be there. And so people don't have to be programmed. How am I going to talk to this lady? they'll have the the information for doing that. Okay, so the end of part 2, and we will be back for part 3 in a few moments.